most people are just wound up in worry and stress and regret and jealousy and self-pity, and I mean all this stuff. We're just constantly bringing ourselves down in this negativity. And I found that the validation was living in contentment. Like, contentment seems to be the bottom end of my spectrum these days.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing. And it's happy days are here again. And the universe has brought me an incredible being. Yes, I know I would have said the whole Christmas day, walk down to the tree and look what the universe has brought me. I'm still not tired of that, but I got it in anyway, just in case all the people that are listening were like, he's not going to say it again. I would like to welcome to the podcast today Eric Putkonen, mystic, Yanni, yogi, all things awakening. Welcome to the podcast, my dear friend.
Thank you for having me.
This has been a conversation I've been looking forward to, with a lot of the material that you put out and you're sharing with the Conscious Collective. I would love you to start by just sharing a little bit about yourself leading up to this point.
Do you want to constrain that in any way? That's kind of a big question.
Yeah. Just what the seed of your realization of discovery to how you got where you are today.
Okay. Well, I'll try to summarize it as I can. Born and raised northern Minnesota, in a rural northern Minnesota near the Canadian border. Not really raised in any particular religion. Didn't have any religion at home. And in that area, religion was private, so no one talked about it. So I had no exposure, clean slate, but always was interested in the truth. There was always a sense that there was something just behind what I was looking at that was there. So from an early age, that started different kind of seeking of interesting topics. All my English papers were very interesting topics. Could have been parapsychology, UFOs, anything that came to mind that seemed interesting. By the time I got my teens and into college, it moved into spirituality. Became a ravenous reader of all things spiritual that seemed interesting. That led to about 13 years of practice of varying things. Funny enough, none of it regarding non-duality or enlightenment. I had heard the terms enlightenment and awakening, but I had heard so many contrary definitions and clashing opinions that I really didn't know what it meant, and I was starting to seriously doubt it even existed. And then non-duality, never studied it. But after about 13 years of this ravenous reading and spiritual practice, I got kind of, burnt out, saw the futility of it. Seemed like every new book I'd ever read, or any book I read, became just another revision of something I'd already read. And so in the frustration, I gave up the search and quit meditation, quit reading books, everything. About a year and a half later, Eckhart Tolle's name kept popping up. Now, I had been in spirituality long enough to know about synchronicities. And so when someone's name pops up a half a dozen times in the same week, I'm like, okay, it's a sign to follow up. So I loathed to read yet another book. So I went to the public library and said, well, maybe he's got a video on file. And he had one. So I watched The Flowering of Human Consciousness. Much of the material was similar to what I'd read before or heard about. I mean, he talked about being present. And up until that point, I thought I knew what that meant. That was part of the problem, is I thought I knew what it meant. But during the course of the video, he started talking about inhabiting the body and trying to be present in a slightly different direction. And so in playing with that, I became very, very present. The thought dropped away. There was just no thought. Now, I will preface, this isn't the first time I was present. so I don't want to give the impression that it was this video that made it happen. I've been present before. I remember being at Machu Picchu and thought died away and there wasn't a thought in my head and I was very present for 15 minutes or so. Everybody experiences moments of presence. But what I find is those are kind of more opportune times. And so I happen to be very present at this time. And I guess I was just right. And so kind of the wind blew, the apple fell, and awakening happened. So, which I describe more as just things suddenly clicked. I what I was looking for, I found. It was non-conceptual. It took me time to turn it into concepts that I could talk about. And it was non-dual in nature. So when they talk about non-duality or Advaita, that's kind of my vein now. In the video, Eckhart Tolle also mentioned, or Eckhart Tolle is actually the right way to pronounce it, but he had mentioned Ramana Maharshi, and so I read a book of Ramana Maharshi. I think it was Be As You Are, Goodman's book, and the book just resonated with me. It was like, yep, that's exactly what happened to me, and what he's talking about made perfect sense to me. And so at that point, I knew that I had realized it, and I knew what I had realized via common experience with what Ramana was talking about. And so that was let's see, that awakening happened in November 2005. So it's been 19, going on 19 years.
Amen to that, brother.
So that's the nutshell.
Right. So, what do you use as your barometer now as a guiding force? Just listening to your own intuition, or are you still seeking other sort of like identifiers that would define what it is you're experiencing?
I have no identifiers. I don't particularly worry about defining things, but I would say most of the time my mind's pretty silent. I'm very present. Suffering's fallen away. I don't what suffering I did have has fallen away. The chronic suffering most people experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I find is it's not particularly seeking. Seeking ends too, but most seeking derives from lack. I'm trying to fulfill myself in some way. And now it's more or less playing. I'm like, okay, I'm very content now and I'm happy normally. Is there a way to raise the mood more consistently? And so I play with actively trying to instill more joy and awe in life. That's kind of what I do these days.
And so, what's the reflection of a non-dualist?
How's that again?
What's the reflection? What is the present? I mean, in essence, I mean, that would be the present moment and having all things as one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, non-duality is essentially that. The way I like summarizing it is it's non-separation. It basically says all separation and otherness is an illusion. It's our divisive mind that's divided that which is inherently undivided. And so what happens is I would say awakening and enlightenment in particular is not about a new experience. If anything, it's a cessation of the experience of separation arising. And so, kind of abiding in non-duality is more about just knowing this isn't other. There is no separation, and not having that sense that it's other. So, I mean, it's not that it's easy to get there, so to speak, but the idea is pretty simple.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how far you've gone down the Taoist rabbit hole, but I mean, the very essence of Taoism is highest ascension is being the source of all things.
Yeah.
The channeling is the highest ascension, direct source information. We perceive reality as yin and yang, two sides of a mountain. You go up the mountain, you merge the two, realize everything as this present moment.
Yeah.
And so dualism in of itself is just subject to a 3D reality if you even want to pepper in the whole physics sort of idea. Yet, the identifier would be the materialistic sort of like transmutation of light to wave to matter to particle, creating polarizing effects of what would be perceived as good and bad, up and down, in and out, left and right. And to merge that.
Yeah, but good and bad and up and down don't really exist.
No.
So
yeah, that's the humanistic perception until otherwise noted.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, I mean, it fundamentally, it comes down to dispelling a fundamental ignorance of reality, seeing it as it is. And so you're no longer, well, for one, you're no longer fooled by the conventions of speech. And so you may say me and you or up or down, but you don't really conceive or feel these things to be actually separate things. It's kind of like North Pole and South Pole on a magnet. You may use these terms, but it's one magnet, and neither can exist without the other. Every magnet has a North and South pole. You chop off the South Pole, you get a new South Pole. They can't be separated. They're one thing.
Right. No, I would agree with you. It's just those mechanisms of what people perceive as the universe is still a polarizing effect. Now, to obtain something that's beyond this electromagnetic spectrum, which is Tao, Buddha, prana, chi, God, that's not of the same. It's cut. This reality is cut from that cloth. Yet to actually be the present moment, that's when miraculous things take place. That's how I train people: manifestation, magic, healing, synchronicity. You name it, I've seen it, and there's an absolute resonance that is acquired to obtain that. Oh, the quickening. Oh, yeah. And so that in of itself is sort of, as you said, conceptual to a lot of people until otherwise noted, because there is energetic substance and an absolute palpability that comes with the realization that you are first person, third person, no person, all is one is all, this now. And so how do you maintain that to be realized within your experience so that it's a validation? So now you have obtained this awareness. Where does that lead you? Where do you go from here?
Well, I'll address the first question that you said about what do you do to maintain it, and that is nothing at all. Fundamentally, what I'm talking about is the shattering of the illusion of separation, which includes the shattering of the illusion of me. And as soon as you say I can lose this or I need to maintain this, well, that's the illusion of me that should have shattered. And so I would say once the profound visceral realization in one's being of there is no other happens, it's the most natural state to be in. It doesn't take anything to maintain it. If a thought of me arises, it's fine. It's just not believed. If it's believed and you're wondering, how do I maintain this other thing? Well, then you're still believing in the me in some way, and I would suggest investigating that. But I would say the full realization that of shattering the illusion of separation in me requires nothing to maintain it. Afterwards, you're kind of free to do whatever you want to do. I mean, some people like Ramana Maharshi, his brother goes, "Why don't you go be a monk?" And he's like, "Good idea." And he went off to a cave and meditated and became basically a swami. Then there's people like me. We just kind of hang out in the householder's life, still hold a job, have a family. Really, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
There is no requirements. You're not required to do anything. And so in this freedom, whatever interests you. Now, for me, this body, mind, personality, when I say me or I, just to be clear for viewers, I don't mean an identity. It's not like me, I'm not talking an identity. When I say me, I'm just referring to this body, mind, character. You know.
Avatar.
So what's that?
Avatar.
Yeah. So me as this character, the body has the personality and conditioning to be interested in, you know, seeing things fall away. And so in terms of, you know, if there's some latent conditioning or I'm wondering how to increase joy or awe, I like delving into that stuff. It's of interest. And so I do so. And so, you know, after awakening, I continued working, I ended up dating, getting married, having a family. You know, now, you know, I still continue to delve into joy and awe and other aspects. You know, I picked up hand drumming, picked up hobbies, still have friends. Well, I live in the world and I engage with the world and I enjoy it. Some others, you know, might feel they want to leave, but it's not so much. I would say if they're looking at it as an escape, that would be a flag for me, because I would think it comes down to a real choice in terms of, you know, what do I want to do? And after awakening, you're pretty comfortable in any situation. I mean, whether you're alone or with people, it really doesn't matter particularly. Because I had just out of curiosity and fun, I told my wife I want to do a silent solitary retreat, and she's like, well, "What are you going to do?" And I go, "Well, I found this remote cabin out in the middle of nowhere, won't see a soul, and I'm gonna go there. They don't have a TV or internet connection or anything. I'm not going to bring my phone. I'm not going to bring devices. I'm not going to bring games, books, nothing. No distractions. All I have to do all day is to be here now, sitting in the woods." And I'm not going to talk to myself, and I'm not going to talk to anybody. And I did that for like 3 or 4 days, and I found it rather interesting, because in that experiment, I kind of learned a couple of things. But that's, again, my personality. I like delving into this stuff for fun. But that kind of stuff can happen where, you know, that for those 3 or 4 days, there wasn't a soul around. I didn't speak to anybody. There was nothing to do, and I didn't do anything. I wasn't bored. I wasn't lonely. I didn't have a problem with it. It could have kept on going that way, and I would have been fine. So it's not like the decision making is a little different, because the egotistic mind is usually motivated by the carrot and stick. It's looking for its benefits or running from pain. That's kind of how things move. Post awakening, it's more of, well, this is a game and this is a game. Which one would I rather play today? You know, there's not really a bad choice. So it's like, yeah, I could be single and alone and just be in a cave, or I can have a family. That's fine. But at the same time, there's a deep knowledge and knowing of the impermanence of all things. There's nothing static. And I know that me and my wife will be parted one way or another. There's no way around that. And I know that if I outlive her, the odds are I'm going to be single again, and I won't be unhappy when that happens. It'll just be another stage of life, another game to play. And so the world view, I guess, you operate from changes.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I always teach people the first fundamentals of a Taoist journey is to recognize emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. And so that's a baseline infantile sort of entry level. Once you master the emotional state, which is the expression of the humanness, all things change, because that's, again, a separation. And so first you need to not be distracted by the emotional state. And that's a mastery that sort of goes deep within the visceral effects of creating and being able to identify things at a much more refined sensory perception level. And that way you can see things from a clairvoyance level, hear, taste, feel, and it's all wrapped up into an expansion of this tuning fork that you call your physical body, because that's really the major indicator that doesn't get distracted by the intellect, because then you can be intuitive. Because if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. And that immediate response makes it less problematic for a human to be distracted in their thoughts of how things are supposed to be. you're able to register that. And that goes right back to the electromagnetism that is, confined within this universe, the polarizing effects. You and I understand non-centric, non-dualist realization of the present moment, yet, if subject to, and when you are all things, because everything is effortless, everything is seamless and infinite. And that means that there is no end to this physicality. As I like to remind people, the universe is like a bellows. It contracts and expands. Man is not like that. And so if you are still identifying with the physical flesh, you are going to be subject to the effects of that. And so when you're able to move in and out, as you said, what game do you want to play today? That's how I teach people. It's like, this is my personality. My personality is I like Netflix, chocolate bonbons, driving my side-by-side in the desert at 100 miles an hour. That's my bag, baby. But that's my personality.
Yep.
And then that's very easy for me to shift to the now. And that's a mastery. And that's where I was sort of going with your own cultivation of what this is. Even though it's effortless, there needs to be some type of validation. I guess it's your experience, whether it is or
the
not.
validation would be the experience that, I mean, for me, especially early on, I would say the validation would be noticing the lack of chronic suffering. Most people are just wound up in worry and stress and regret and jealousy and self-pity, and I mean all this stuff. We're just constantly bringing ourselves down in this negativity. And I found that the validation was an ever-present living in contentment. As like contentment seems to be the bottom end of my spectrum these days. I mean, due to the body's conditioning and the way it was formed, it does have a predisposition for a fiery temper, which my mother saw at an early age. She said I was just like her sister, had the same look in our eyes when we got mad. So I know there's this tendency of this body to get angry quickly. So I'm not saying anger never arises, but the nature of it has changed quite a bit. I don't particularly suffer from it. If something happens, there might be a momentary feeling of being kind of ticked off, but it passes quickly and doesn't have a residual. Worry doesn't really arise anymore. Regret, I don't have any regrets. There's things that I've watched not arise anymore, and other things continue to fall off. And I find watching that to be my validation, to know that something happened. And I've actually, and I got kind of familiar with Buddhism at one point, and I like the fact that the Four Noble Truths really focused around the fact that there is suffering, and the whole point is suffering can be overcome. They seem to make a big deal of awakening, dukkha ends. And I found that kind of resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, that really is the validation. If you find that suffering and discontent doesn't arise really, or at least in the same way, that's kind of the validation. Also, the feeling of separation, because I would say prior to awakening, the feeling of separation and otherness arose all the time. But afterwards, you just kind of notice that it doesn't really arise. And if you are just aware of what things are as they are, there is a sense of oneness. Not that oneness is an ever constant feeling. It's something that you can evoke or invoke by focusing on it. But the real point is separation never arises. You're not fooled by the fact that there are separate things. If you've got two bottles, you're not fooled by the fact that there are two separate things, as in, I guess you can think about it in a physics way of everything's energy. The forms may vary, but it's all energy in a pool of energy. And from the point of view of energy doesn't care. So everything's kind of connected and interwoven through this pool of energy. And so you recognize the variation of form without being fooled into believing separation and otherness of forms. So there's variation, but not separation, which is sometimes a difficult concept for some people to grasp, that because they think non-duality means sameness, an undifferentiated sameness that is constant everywhere. And I would say that's not quite correct. If anything, I would say non-duality. I mean, for there not to be an other, the fundamental precept of non-duality is there is no other. And if there is no other, that means this is it. This is non-duality. And so it's realizing that non-separation is the key, dispelling the illusion or idea that things can be other, and it's not all just non-duality. It's all not just inherently one. And that's because of ignorance. Because if somebody doesn't know better, there's a forest in Utah called the Pando. Mm-hmm. And if you go out there and you point out all the quaking aspen trees and you ask somebody that doesn't know, how many trees do you see? They'll say, well, I see hundreds, if not thousands. There's acres of trees. It goes on forever. But scientists have studied this, and they found it's only one organism. It's one root structure in which branches come up through the ground, basically. And so it's listed as one of the largest organisms on the planet. And if you did not know this, you would look at all these separate trees and think they are separate things, but they're not. It's one organism. It's kind of like looking at your hand and saying each finger is a separate thing, a separate entity in its own right, detached and other than you. It doesn't work that way. It's all one thing.
Yeah. I mean, this sounds very similar to a Taoist cultivation. Well, you see, we're more interested in that's the dukkha out of the way. Now let's get down with the get down and really start the mastery of expanding one spiritual consciousness within this incarnation. So saturating the physical flesh, realizing it's an anchor, that it is nothing more than that, and that consciousness is all things, and you use this physical flesh to stay in the re-up, the level up of this lifetime, to expand as much as possible. And that's a real mastery in of itself. But if you have more of a Buddhist perception of it, it's we can burn this avatar out and get another one. That's cool. A Taoist has an obsession with immortality, and from the aspect of the cultivation of the 50 trillion cells within this physical flesh, you can commandeer that with consciousness when you master the energetic potential, 0.07 millivolts of electricity per cell. Ooh. So, while you're in the non-dualist experience, you can play Harry Potter and do a bunch of other things that can be met with instant miracles, because you cannot obtain an instant healing, which is where I got my first hit of the spiritual crack pipe 30 years ago, was with that, is witnessing a physical healing where, gangrenous flesh returned to pink in color in 40 minutes. It was a whole foot, actually, but it was mind-blowing. So witnessing that was like, thank you, sir. May I have another? You want more, boy? Yes, I'm Oliver Twist. I want some more. And so that can only be obtained with the present moment. That means no title, no place, no person. And that would be basically being non-dual in your perception. And that is obtained with the now. And that seems to be problematic for anyone that still identifies as the human, yet that is an anchor for this very re-up. So if you're in the game, if you're in the hologram that some scientists would perceive as their theory of all things, then you need to handle that business so you can keep that re-up, or maybe not. Within Taoism, it's like funny because people go, oh, it's an Eastern philosophy. It's the same as Buddhism. Like, absolutely no. Buddhists don't believe in God. Buddhists don't believe in there's something greater than nothing. And they look for the pain and suffering, and they keep looking for it until there's nothing left. Burn the avatar out and re-up on the next one. And that's kind of like looking at life like a pile of dirt covered in diamonds. Take off another diamond looking for another piece of dirt. Whereas a Taoist will look at life like a pile of diamonds covered in dirt.
Well, both of those, in my mind, put too much emphasis on me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, for me, it's not about, wait till the next incarnation. Because that's not on me. It's not me incarnating from life to life. If anything, I'm the whole show. I'm all incarnation. It's the whole play playing out. This body mind can do things, but it's not like I'm looking forward to the next life, because there is no, I'm not worried about a next life for a me. So I'd say it's a slightly different point of view. That's where I deviate from some of the classical, because usually, now part of it, I think it might be culturally, because in the East, reincarnation was so ingrained that when Buddha and other traditions came along, I don't know if he just went with the idea or not, but reincarnation is still aspects of Buddhism and other Eastern traditions. But I would say it always struck me as odd, this idea of a me that reincarnates when fundamentally there is no me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at different layers. I always bring it right back to the simplicity of this. You're either having a monologue or a dialogue. It's one or the other, and if you're in the dialogue, then you're having fun with it. You're the Harry Potter, you're the personality, you're in my situation, when I have a dialogue, it's normally with one of my teachers in the spirit realm, which I access information from. I have over 171 of them. In the Taoist perception, they are a facet, all different facets of the diamond, which is perfection, which is now, the mother of all things. And so, we can go right down to that non-dualistic perception being, guess what? None of that makes any sense whatsoever. It's unnecessary. Yet,
well, it boils it down to, I mean, it kind of more in a classical Advaita Vedanta way. Brahman alone exists; there is no other, and so wherever the eye looks, there's only Brahman seen, whether you call it by another name or not.
Yeah, that's the monologue I speak of.
Yep.
Like if I am all things, I am the now. If I say heal, it heals. If I say manifest, it manifests. It's the now. So you're not asking yourself, if you are the Tao, if you are the now, if you are all things, whatever's coming through is instantly materializing. Does that make sense? Because this is a 3D reality, so you're still subject to the distortion of that. It's whether your resonance is higher and you're coming from perfection, because all this is cut out of the cloth of perfection. It's a distorted depth of perfection, a different resonance. Everything is energy. Everything has every energy has a vibration. Every vibration has a frequency. And if you meet that frequency with the resonance, oh, yes, it will be yours. Oh, yes. And then, of course, then you go, hang on a second, but you're saying you. So, but if you truly believe you're non-dualistic and you are all things, then you is nothing and everything at the same time.
Yeah, Nisargadatta Maharaj said something like that. He says, my mind tells me I am nothing. My heart tells me I am everything. And between these, my life flows.
And that is what we call the versica, or the center point, or what we call between the yin and the yang, the wu ji, right? The stillness, the mother of all things, the Tao. It still returns to that center. And that center is where that's the magic right there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like I said, I like focusing on increasing overall joy and awe in life, which isn't exactly saying it in so many words, but that is increasing one's vibration.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. You know, every day I wake up, I look at my wife like it's the first I ever met her.
Excellent.
So, because that's what I teach people, how to hold that energy. Because when you are all things, when you are the monologue, you're abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. So when we speak of the Tao, the mother, being a bellows, you contract and expand as the universe does. Man does not. Man exhausts. Man is limited. So when you're able to access that and you can repeat it, you can see self-evident expression of this non-dualist state of all things. The biggest recognizing, validating effects is whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want. And then it comes back to, but you just said you. And it's like, it's a mastery of being able to move things apart. Like, I take my personality and I put it in the corner of the room. I tell it to roll over and play dead. And when I'm ready, you come back. Right now, I am all things. First person, third person, no person. And it's like, whoa, but how do you
realizing that some people get caught up that in having that lived experience, it doesn't make you incapable to use the conventions of speech and pronouns. It's just you mean different things when you say me or you or I. They don't have the same meaning as somebody who's very egoic, believing they are the me and I.
Well, when they know, you know, not just believing, but knowing. Yeah. So, you know, I'll give you an example of you know, within Nigong, which is internal power.
Yep.
That's part of what we do, which is Nidan, which is internal alchemy. And we incorporate Qigong, which is like a contemporary sort of bastardized version of an extension of Nigong. Basically, Qigong is moving energy with your mind. Nigong is moving energy with mind. Qigong is moving energy with your breath. But you are able to obtain this now moment, meaning you're operating a new definition of multitasking on steroids. You're operating everywhere at once. And so anything that is materialized within the void, because once you obtain that palpability, there's a blank screen. So right now I'm talking to you, I'm having what would be equivalent to the highest level of a DMT experience, floating through the universe, absorbing all the synchronicity and the palpability of the energetic profiles of asteroids, planets, constellations. And I'm experiencing it right now, viscerally, and with my eyes open. Now, that's a mastery. People tend to go, oh, I'm OBing, I've got to lay down, I've got to attempt to get to a sleep paralysis perspective where I'm shutting everything down to leave the spirit. Taoists have been doing this for tens, I'm just going to say it, tens, hundreds of thousands of years. People are like, that's ridiculous. There's no logical way that that's been recorded at any more than 6,000 BC. Let me tell you, my teachers will give you information, direct source stuff that will make your toes curl, because there's nothing more visceral than information that is getting your attention from that tuning fork. But the whole point of it is you get to operate everything at the now. And that means all possibility is at your fingertips as this present moment. And so we validate it from this type of mastery, where you would perceive me as my personality, where I'm operating in all dimensions at once from a physics perspective. But it actually goes deeper than that when you look at someone who has, and that's why I mentioned Walter Russell as being probably the only example of someone in the Western world that has ever got close enough to be able to document from his own trance channeling information that would be close to validating what we know as Taoists and have for thousands of years. And when they look at the profile of these vortices that he's visualized, drawn, and painted into his perception of what the universe is, using a new version of the periodic table within a somatic sort of expression of the universe, is the yin and yang symbol. And that, you know, I always find people, I'm either walking down Venice Beach or I'm somewhere, and someone's got a nice big badass tattoo on their back or their somewhere. I'm like, oh, where'd you get that? Oh, yeah, I kind of just got motivated to put that on. I go, do you have any idea what it means? No, you know, good and bad or something like that. I'm like, that's a Taoist symbol. It's been around for thousands of years. Yet when you look at the vortices and the cycle of that energy and how it moves, you know, we go deeper in that spiraling effect that sort of contradicts a lot of this straight line theory and math that people have been applying for thousands of years, yet it's been a distraction, a distortion. Everything is an expanding and contracting, and that polarizing, and then you go past that. You and I know that it's all one, yet what do you do to validate it other than you know? For me, I like to experience it. I like to be able to witness the effects of my realization. And so, for example, I use this example. I was driving down highway. It was about 10 miles over the speed limit. It was like 50, 60 miles. Had my family in the car. Got pulled over by a cop. Now, his energy from the get was just bad. And because my resonance is so high, I have the polarizing effect subject of a duality that takes place. You either love me or hate me. That's how it works. That's just the transmission of this reality, right? Until otherwise noted. You know, you and I are on a different path to be able to be in that state. You know, you talk about joy, bliss, happiness. So he approaches the car, he pulls us over. Wind the windows down. I've got all my kids in the car, my wife's in the car, and we wind the windows down. And he's literally got his hand on his holster, and he's got his buddy behind him, and he's like, license and registration. I'm like, my personality wasn't having it. I'm just, you know, I get to play in these things when you are truly aware and you can actually shift and witness it and experience it viscerally. And I said, is there any reason why in your mind you thought to draw a gun on my family? And he's just like, give me your license and registration. And he reached across the passenger seat to grab my license and registration. He walked back to the car. Now, before he'd even pulled up behind me, I'd already set a course of alteration of all reality through my attention, intention, my ability to shift through this thing called dimensional shifts. And so from face value, you would see my personality basically reacting to an event, which is basically polarizing, yin and yang, or yin and yang and yang. You have the effects of duality taking place from an observer's perspective. Now, I had already altered that. So he came up to the car. He grabbed my stuff. He said, I'm going to bring you back a ticket right now. And when he returned, you wouldn't be surprised, but let me tell you, he handed me my license of registration. He apologized for pulling me over. He told me not to do it again. And I had an amazing family, and enjoy your day, sir. Now, that would not have been possible had I not been able to shift into different states. I was already in the non-dualist state that you speak of for me to obtain that ability, even though at face value, someone would see you're in your personality. You can't shift between it, but you can absolutely 1000% be in all states at once. Have you ever experienced that, or are you familiar with that at all?
I have experience with that prior to awakening. I mean, not so much on a willed conscious level.
Mm-hmm.
More of just intuition and will just making things work. I remember there was a young woman I knew. She wanted a specific book that she was having a hard time looking for by a local author where the story took place in the city when I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And one of my friends I knew, was a long time fantasy science fiction reader. And I asked him if he knew the book, and he said no. I looked online, found out it was out of print. It was on Amazon for several $100s or something for a copy. And I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. And so I just kind of paused for a second, probably one of those times where I was silent and in the now and present. And it occurred to me I should reach out to my friend and ask him next time he goes to the store, get me a book. So I ended up calling him, I think that afternoon, and I said, hey, the next time you go to this store that you always love going to so much, I know it's a sci-fi fantasy bookstore. Look, here's the author's name, here's the book. Get me a copy if they have it on the shelf at a reasonable price. And if they have two, get them both. I'll take one. And he calls me back a couple hours later going, how did you do that? He goes, I go in there. There's two on the shelf signed by the author for like $8 each. That kind of stuff. Yeah, I've got kind of experience with kind of shaping reality. But I would say it's taken a lot more backseat since waking up. I mean, I would say, once realizing non-duality, there's a certain sense of the perfection of the world as it is. And so I'm not too keen on influencing it as much.
Well, it's kind of like returning things to perfection. Now, on an overview of that whole experience, the purpose was to have that cop return to perfection. Something that was static, that was overwhelmingly clear of his anxiety, his stress, his fear, his anger, was returning.
Yep.
State. And that's all I did was help him along his way, returning to perfection. And what could have been a problematic day ended with happiness.
Yeah, I mean, I would have done much the same, but the way I think of it would be different, although the approach would probably look very similar from the outside. Is being in that scenario, being pulled over, you see the cop, you roll on the window going, afternoon, officer, what can I do for you? And as you're in this presence and in this silence and contentment, not engaging with his active hostility, and just and if anything, almost acting like a lightning rod for for the negative energy almost, he might find in interacting with you suddenly being far more calm. It's more of being infected by stillness and silence and presence. That's kind of how I would look at it. The result would be more or less the same. It's just how we look at it that differs.
Yeah. Well, Taoists don't look at things as good and bad. It's just
yeah, good and bad is an arbitrary decision by people. Yeah, I would agree. There is really no such thing as good and bad. We can label things as good and bad, but it's just simply what it is.
Right. And then the effect of that.
And the effect of that.
The three ingredients of your whole reality is a thought, feeling, and an emotion. That's it. And most people would split hairs on what emotions and feelings are, but they're not the same.
They're not the same. Yeah, they're not the same, but I would say they're similar, and they feed off each other quite a bit. So, but yeah, I wouldn't say they're the same. If anything, I mean, if you try to liken them similar, if anything, I would say emotions tend to be more sticky. They tend to reside in the body, while thoughts tend to reside more in the mind.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the effect within Taoism. There's three parts to it. It's conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, which is all part of what you would perceive as a thought, an emotion, and a feeling. And then when you are able to be 100% conscious, that means your default is just the now. Everything blends as one. There are no there is no separation. And so then it's you're off to the races. All bets are off. Quickening. There could only be one. What was that Sean Connery's like? The Haggis.
Yeah.
That was an awesome movie. It's been a long time since we've had good quality films, and that's a long time lost, my dear friend. It doesn't happen anymore. We've just got this absolute nonsense that's being peddled today. Yeah. So when you do this, do you create processes? Is this more for yourself, or the fact of your family, your environment? Do you show others this very method of awakening?
I like talking about awakening and non-duality. I've got a YouTube channel devoted to that. I sometimes host songs and have people come over to my house and we talk about it. So I like sharing about it and kind of pointing the way that, pointing at ways they can maybe get more present and potentially awaken and things like that. So I like talking about it. I like sharing it, but my wife isn't particularly interested in it. And that's fine. So yeah.
Interesting. And what's the result of that?
Nothing in particular. I mean, when we met, she has a very spiritual tendency and inclination. But she's also very open, where it's like, you can do whatever you want to do. So if I decide I'm going to do a day of silence or go on a silent retreat, she's totally supportive of that. If I go to a kirtan or some meditation, she might come with me. Sometimes she's interested, sometimes she isn't. But non-duality itself doesn't particularly interest her. She actually studied quite a bit of Taoism and had a Tai Chi teacher that was very Taoist, and she kind of likes studying that. But they use this, the terms and the language is slightly different. The pointers are different, and so she likes those pointers, and the way I talk about it doesn't interest her.
How would you approach a physical ailment?
Well, pretty much of it comes down to embracing and allowing it to be, and then doing what you can about it. I had a crown put on a tooth a while ago that actually got abscessed and needed a root canal, and the doctor wasn't available for several days. So what ended up happening is there's this, some people would say an excruciating pain. They would say, a tooth like that needing a root canal is one of the most painful things you can have. Some say, I don't know, but it hurt a lot. But I wasn't resisting the pain. I was just allowing it to be and kind of embracing the experience of it, and found it wasn't that bad. Particularly if I took aspirin. So I took aspirin occasionally to somewhat dull it. And I just knew I had to wait a couple of days and I'd see the doctor. And so time passed and saw the doctor, and they did the root canal. I've been great since. Injury is much the same. I remember I haven't done it in a while, but I used to do woodworking. And I had a bit of an accident once and ended up taking a drill bit to the hand. And it's not like, some people would freak out or swear at themselves or beat themselves up or, freak out about the whole accident. For me, there was a deep calm to it. It's like, oh, that was a mistake. What can I do about it? So it's like, you just kind of treat it the best you can and go, well, I need to go to the clinic. And so I hop in the car and I go to the clinic. It happened to be closed because it was after hours. And I'm like, I don't need to go to the emergency room. It doesn't feel that bad. It wasn't gushing blood. I go, all they would really do is stitch it at best. So I basically super glued it. I super glued it shut. And then the next day I went to the clinic, and the doctor looked at it and goes, "Does it hurt?" And I'm like, "Not really." And he goes, "Well, it looks clean. It looks good." He goes, "If it gets infected, let me know, but just let it heal." And so so yeah, injury, ailment, they're taken in stride. They're not resisted. But if you can do something about it, you do it. If you can take an aspirin, if you can go get a surgery, you can go get treatment in some way, go do it. I'm not saying you just put you know, I'm not saying you just put up with it for as long as it exists and let it run its course. I mean, do something if you can. But if you can't do anything about it, then you allow it to be. That's kind of how I deal with it.
Wouldn't you say that's still sort of operating more in a dualistic sort of perception?
It's not separate. It's just recognizing the body's hurt and not resisting the experience of the body. It's not
But
really
the body would indicate distortion. That's a dual.
Injury's not a distortion. I wouldn't call it a distortion. Accidents happen, injuries happen. They're inevitable. The physical body will experience pain. That's inevitable and inescapable.
But you see for me, that identifies as a dualist sort of perception, because pain, to be at one with all. The only reason I say this is because I see it on a daily basis. I've seen bones fuse, flesh heal.
Well, what I'm trying to say though is
to embody the magnet.
Because some people wish. Well, I would like the body to never feel pain. And I said, well, if the body is incapable to feel pain, you'd also lose your sense of touch. The sense of touch inherently comes with the ability to feel pain. Because if you sever said nerves that feel touch, it's going to register as pain. And so I don't resist or deny pain. I go, if the body feels pain, that's a natural thing to alert of damage. It's a healthy thing. For people that can't feel pain, let's say with neurological diseases like some forms of diabetes or leprosy or anything else, where they lose the ability to feel pain or sense of touch because they go together. Often what happens is they get a cut. They don't realize they got cut. It goes untreated, gets infected, goes worse, could turn gangrenous, and then they need an amputation. All because they couldn't feel pain. Pain has got its purpose. Pain helps. So I don't resist pain.
It's interesting because I've had these conversations with neurologists. Neuroplasticity that you see before you, the flesh and blood, is very limited. People say that there is no such thing. And neurologists will say there is no such thing as a third eye. There's no sympathetically innervated nerve endings in your third eye for you to obtain a feeling. That's absolutely false, because I can get you to feel everything. Once you understand the energetic potential of the cell, everything is possible. So energetically, everything is energy, frequency, vibration. Neurology is limited at best because it's a perception of what you perceive as a 3D reality. So when I say all is what I am playing, it's like you're either in or you're out of this realization, because that would then be subject to, and that's okay. Maybe you're having your all is one day that's not obtaining the physical flesh, and that's a separate, and I do that too. I like it.
The thing is everything's fundamentally one, to the point that all the pain in the world is not other than being experienced by the self. And so the whole idea of, well, I can save this body that I'm consciously aware of from feeling pain is kind of strange to me. Because that's denying the fact that you are also experiencing the pain of every other body in the world. So right. For me, it's like the division between the bodies has faded. I don't see them as other. If I see someone in pain on the street, I know it's pain. I don't call it a deformity and say you should do something about it. So in that way, I have no problem with this body having pain. I'm like, well, this body's having pain the same as any other body in this world that has pain when it's injured.
Well, pain is sort of like a nociception of a disturbance, right? So within the body, you have receptors, and most people, most of the mechanoreceptors are around the joints, and they elevate this state of homeostasis and balance and basically well-being. And you have the nociceptors that are around the more problematic effects of the spine, the lower back, certain parts of the body that would indicate damage, and that creates a high sort of pain message. And so you, if you are truly an expression of the universe, all is one, one is all, as above, as below, hermetic stuff, I don't really get into that, but from a Taoist perspective, yin and yang, merging as one, the Wu Ji, that everything is as one. So you can turn a nociception into a mechanoreception, and you can be at one with all things. Pain is an indicator of a distortion within the universe, which is a rippling effect. So this is the universe. Every organ is an expression of the universe. And from a reflexology or a perception within basic fundamental of Chinese medicine, which is a subsection of Taoist alchemy, you use the face, the hands as the micro version of a macro, and you can identify all the turbulence and distortion within that. And if you look at the 12 meridians, which there are not 12 within the physical body, heads up to all the people that were delusional by thinking that there's actually 36, 81, 108. We can go on, but let's just say we stay with the fundamental 12, which would be reflected on the 12 signs of the zodiac and also reflected on the universe. And you go on and on and on, the macro, the micro, the micro, the macro. That's where I'm sort of at in relation to. So pain is an option. Pain is just an identification of a disturbance that you can alter at will.
And if that's the case, turn off the pain other people feel.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if I had a skewer here, normally what I do for fun and games, which is part of just the training, I envelop my forearm in anesthesia, run a skewer through it back and forth. You won't see an
it's a trick anybody can learn. I mean, the Indian fakirs did that kind of thing for generations, for hundreds of years, if not millennia. It is a skill to turn off pain.
Well, it's a skill.
I'm saying it's not necessary to do so, and it's not. There's no problem in feeling pain.
No, I never said there was a problem, but it's a viewpoint of your perception. That's all. So pain threshold. When I say that, you are transmuting a certain level, like from a channeling perspective, and I've been channeling for over 30 years. And I have many friends that have traveled around the world just as me, training under masters that levitate, stop their heart, do all this kind of crazy stuff, set fire by using the channeling of the electromagnetic spectrum, separating electric from magnetic. I teach people this type of stuff. That's a wonderment of just the excitement that you are able to delve into these states. Now, I have a lot of friends that don't give a rat's ass about that shit, but they still cultivate. They like to be in the present moment, and they're deep into their yogi journey, their Buddhist journey, their Hindu journey. They're deep into Sanskrits. They're deep into Hermeticism. They're all these types of different things, and everyone has their place. But it's like when you saturate this physical body with this palpable substance that is not from this electromagnetic spectrum, you can do crazy things. And that's kind of like the self-evident thing where you go beyond what is a distortion of perfection. So within the channeling system, one of my friends who's traveled the world doing similar things to me for the last 30 years, training under a lot of these gurus, when you channel the energy of something greater than what's within this, which we'd call God, Buddha, universe, it's different. It's not from a scientific perspective, scalar energy. It's chi, it's prana, it's perfection. And what happens is the physical body is a representation of that. So I can put my hand over a flame and leave it there for minutes on end, pull it away, and there's no damage to the physical flesh when I am channeling that substance. And so it just shows you what is possible. And, you can dumb it down to the simplicity of hypnotizing someone. I love to do that for fun. I teach my kids That was one of the first things I taught them on the road of healing, remote viewing, things of that nature. Hypnotizing is a great way to realize, hey, this is now. If I can hypnotize you and erase your name, make you think I look like Justin Bieber, and I mean, that's one of my favorites, is like, you erase their name, I'm Justin Bieber, you take their wallet and keys, their friends are videotaping it, because we do it on the Strip down here in Vegas. And it's always a fun little exercise on now. That means that anyone can get to a now. What do you want to do? You can change it to anything at will. Just being now, though. And so that's that moment. Then you get a sample of it, and they're like, wow, that was amazing. I said, what do you want to get away from this? Well, I've got a phobia. I've got this, that. Let's get rid of that. Boom, gone in seconds. And so, the subject of the humanist is the humanist. There's nothing wrong with it. I know people that are like, I'm here to suffer. This is my journey. I like it. And I always tell people, listen, if you're in anger, and anger is more addictive, more potent, more infectious than your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your family, your relationship with the universe, have at it. Enjoy it. That's your relationship with anger. That's what feeds your very essence. And so when that comes up, this is the human thing. And so when you talk about the physicality, I'm just all in on all is one is all, and there's different gradients of that. So your experience comes down to the physical is the physical. It's still one, the pain, the suffering, the non-pain, the non-suffering is all the same. Would you say that?
Well,
because I mean, you can literally create whatever you want. Like, that's the limit. Yeah. I always tell people, your imagination limitation of everything.
I would say, I mean, suffering is self-created, self-inflicted misery. I mean, if that's really what you want to do to yourself, great. But so I mean, for me, I would say I would never rationalize suffering as, yeah, that's something, that we should all strive for. But I mean, it's, when it comes to pain, I see a value in pain.
Yeah.
And so I don't, I kind of go with it instead of trying to cure it, because if I feel a pain, I'm like, okay, there's something I got to pay attention to. Yeah. Something I got to heal or quit moving that way or something. If I didn't notice it, I would just damage the body worse through repetition.
To you and I believe we have the same message. It's an identifier. To me, I would regulate the harmony, which would eliminate the pain immediately, or create a healing, or do whatever else. So I think we're saying the same thing, but maybe in a different way. You said
probably a different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's funny when, I mean, the world as it is, there is a kind of see, I hesitate to call it sameness, because it's like, well, it's all the same, it's all equal. No, I would say nothing is superior, nothing is inferior, and nothing is equal. It's like, pain and not pain it's not so much equal, it's just different expressions of what's going on. Suffering and not suffering, it's not superior, inferior, or equal. Different expressions of what's going on. And as as a body mind, because as a conscious awareness, there is this sense of acting, although it's really one consciousness acting through all bodies. But from this point of view of acting in this body, you can do things to improve or change. So I'm not saying wallow in pain or wallow in suffering, but so it's not exactly seeing it all as same or equal, but just it's different manifestations. And some of it may be worth changing. Like, I would always recommend, get rid of suffering. That's something that does not serve a purpose. Really, it does not help you. You're just making yourself miserable. But pain, I'm like, okay, well, there's pain. Yes, you could learn to get rid of pain, but at the same time, you could just go, I'll deal with pain as it is and allow pain to be, because it's a good indicator of, hey, this is something to look at because it hurts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're pretty similar. We just use different pointers and nomenclature.
Yeah. But I mean, pain is just the needle is off. Now you want to bring it back to the center. It's not in the center. It needs to be in the center. So whatever that is, bring it back to the center. And that's just a hey, look over here. Hey, check it out. Because I mean, I love having healthy conversations with neurologists that want to debate the fact that, solid organs are not sympathetically innervated, so you can't feel them. That's absolute nonsense when you get to energy. And that's where they don't have the data, they're validated in their own intellectual limited perception that creates a problematic effect of a very limited viewpoint.
Yeah.
And so, once you harness the energy, all bets are off. And that's why I like the self-evident exploration and experiential moment of now for it to be validated by you, not by me. I don't want you to take what I'm saying at any sort of value. It has to be the
self-validated. You got to find out for yourself.
You have to validate it for yourself. So when I teach people a cultivational practice, a healing practice, an internal alchemy practice, you have to be able to show me. I very much don't. You have to show me. So I'm not going to put words in your mouth, because the first access point for a human is to believe you're suggesting me into believing this. So I'll give them a practice that you follow these steps. Now explain to me what you're experiencing.
Yeah,
I write it down before they explain it. So I will write it down before they explain it, leave it on a piece of paper. Now, I want you to explain to me what you experience. And they'll go, well, this happened, and this happened, this happened. Now turn the paper over. Oh, holy shit, how did you know? Because I know. That's what I know, more than I know anything.
Well, I mean, the stories of the stuff that we talk about, if anything, are just pointers to inspire people to do the practices that we suggest. We're like, this is what you can experience. This is how you get there.
And it's really interesting, because you get into a state, because this stuff from me within Taoism is hundreds of thousands of years old.
Yep.
And it's handed down from generation to generation. For all that time, you literally have millions and millions and millions and millions of people that have cultivated this stuff before you. And all you have to do is realize that I'm just driving on a rainy day behind someone on a highway, driving in the groove that they've already created by breaking the inertia of the water to the oil on the slick of the road, giving you a better path of least resistance so that you can drive safely.
And cutting the wind in front of you, so it doesn't take as much effort.
Yes, and I truly believe that's what all these indigenous practices are for. And then ultimately, the highest state of spiritual consciousness, as James Tooney would say, is the now. And then the self-evidence is being able to obtain information. You may call it an intuitive moment, synchronicity, serendipity. These are things that can be trained. I train people to create that reality. Magic as a Taoist, and we go into deep magical practices using star stepping, constellation, grids, ancient geometry, things of that nature to move the energy appropriately within an environment or internally, so that things will literally come down right to the last little dot of this level of manifestation. But you have to synchronize for that to take place, and you have to have a very, very deep connection with the energetic properties. And that's just cultivating. That's awakening what you already know. That's like basically all I do is help you remember who you are, which is the now.
I would say the now, the present moment, is also my fundamental practice. Because if I talk to anybody, and when they go, what can I do? That's my go-to. I'm like, you need to learn to be present, to be here now. Just still, silent, fully aware, not thinking. That is the key. But I also, at the same time, usually will tell them, don't expect it to cause awakening. It just creates a more conducive environment. It eliminates a lot of the distraction of thoughts of future, past, imagination, where you're able to focus on the now and perhaps see what is as it really is. But seeing that what is as it really is easiest when you're not distracted. So I always find, being present is the fundamental practice, which is why I kind of, a lot of people go, what do you think about Eckhart Tolle? And I'm like, if anything, he's spread the whole idea of being present much more mainstream, which we sorely need.
And still there's a level of shadowing, which he has a deep level of depression that he contends with on a daily basis. And that's self-evident in just the vibration that he puts out and through the remnants of his linguistics, which it's so funny when I share that with people, they go, oh shit, that makes sense. Yeah, because the guy's actually quite negative. As much as he puts out all this stuff and everyone goes, oh, I resonate with him. Take a closer look. He's contending with his stuff, and whether he's sharing or not, perhaps he is, perhaps he isn't. I don't study his stuff. I don't know anything about his stuff other than the expression of the resonance and everything that anyone has ever shared with me. And he's contending with this overshadowing, this shadow side that these people talk about, which would be a darkness, which doesn't exist for a Taoist. It's just yin. Yet he's contending with that. Have you noticed anything like this from his teaching?
Not particularly. He's got unique mannerisms. I usually like watching videos by him better. His books don't portray his real personality very well. I mean, if you read his books, what you get from that is very different from a video, because he's got a very dry a dry humor that usually involves minor pantomime. And he'll make some comment about needing, and he'll have this kind of pantomime that just kind of emphasizes the point. And he comes off as, to me, as a pretty mellow, cheerful guy with a really dry sense of humor, almost kind of very European, almost foreign to the American mind. That's just my impression, though.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what would you share with the audience as that? I mean, I think I asked this question, but I'll ask it again because I've got clearly no memory. What was the defining moment that validated this non-dualist experience as being real to you, that it wasn't just conceptual? What was the moment in your experience that made it real?
The lived experience of suffering no longer arising. I ceased to worry. And I had been a worrier, and I just no longer worried. Regret, what regret I had fell away. Suddenly I was at peace with my past as it was. In a way, it was like seeing clearly. Part of non-duality and becoming very present is you have to embrace what you are as you are now and be content, if not happy, with who you are now. But to get to that, you also would have to accept everything that happened in the past that got you to now. And so in a way, I saw that everything that had happened in my past, no matter how painful or how much suffering it was, helped kind of create this being currently. And being happy with the current being. I didn't regret anything that happened. I mean, I could look back at my past and I go, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm totally content with now as it is. I don't need to change anything in my past. And so, just having no regret, no worry, the self-pity, a lot of this stuff just kind of fell away. Was always the kind of the validation point for me, because I always recommend it as a validation point for others, because sometimes people will come to me and go, well, how do I know if I'm awake? And I go, well, life will show you. If if you still have chronic suffering, probably didn't happen. If you're still a ball of stress and worry with tons of regrets and always beating yourself up and pitting your lot and playing victim and all this stuff that we do, probably hasn't happened yet. I mean, it's more of a, I said you'll know it when you're content with things as they are. You're like, now is fine, now is enough. And it's that kind of lived experience. I mean, there's other little things that kind of went along where thought died down. Most of my days I don't think that much. I'm pretty present all the time. I mean, I would say if anything, I tell people when they're going, well, how much thought dies away? I'm like, oh, 95% of thought. 95% of thought isn't needed. We could let it all go. It's all self-reflective, self-centered thought that is just the mind revving up a story that creates suffering and drama for ourselves. But I'm like, thought died down, which is kind of a secondary, I would say, indicator. But I would say that the starkest, the most obvious validation would be the cessation of suffering. I always use that as the pointer, going, if you're wondering, look to that and be honest with yourself. Don't rationalize or excuse. Really look at what's going on and decide if it's arising because of thought and the belief in a me. Because not all. I mean, there are subtle layers of suffering. I'm talking in generics, because there are subtle levels of suffering where really the word they use in Buddhism is dukkha. Dukkha, usually translated as suffering, also means discontent and dissatisfaction. So really, any dissatisfaction or discontent is suffering to a minor degree. And if you get really black and white and draconian about it, you can say, well, you should have no discontent at any times. And I would go, that's going a little too far. Because there is always going to be probably a little bit of conditioning still stored in the body. Until it's seen, it's never really noticed and released. I mean, I remember I was in my car trying to get to an exit a couple miles from the exit, because 3 lanes, only one was an exit, but that was the one road everybody wanted. And so everybody's kind of crunching into this lane, and I'm watching car after car cut in front of me miles ahead. And this frustration arose. Now, if somebody was just a kind of a draconian absolutist, it's all or nothing, all discontent is gone, they'd go, you have discontent. That shows that you didn't wake up. And I'm like, no, what happened is when I delved into the feeling, because I was curious about it, I'm like, where is this coming from? Where is this frustration coming from? And a memory from early childhood. I mean, I was young, but I was in a store with my mom. We were getting groceries, heading to the checkout line, and I kind of cut around one of the displays, kind of cutting off somebody else that was getting into line. And I remember grabbing me by the shoulder quite firmly and sternly saying, you can't cut in line. Everybody has to wait their turn. And this formed the seed and basis of this rule, that thou shalt not cut in line. And that was what was causing me the angst and frustration, was they were breaking mom's rules. It really had nothing to do with me. It wasn't like I was taking their cutting in front of me personally. It wasn't about me. It was just they were fundamentally breaking a conditioning that was in there. And as soon as that came to conscious awareness, it kind of had to rectify with current understanding. And I could see the absurdity of it. And I could just feel the frustration fade. It was like, oh, that's ridiculous. And it kind of faded. And I've been in similar situations since, where I've seen people cutting in, and it doesn't bother me anymore. It was just unseen conditioning that I was able to bring to conscious awareness and allow it to go. And so, I wouldn't say there is never discontent or frustration of any kind, or you can never be angry, because that's not necessarily true. I mean, there's in Advaita Vedanta non-duality, there's teachers like Mr. Gadana Maharaj, who I mentioned his quote about everything and nothing. He was known for his fiery temper. He had thrown people out of his house screaming at him. And somebody approached him one day, and they go, well, isn't this suffering? And he goes, these are conditioned reactions of the body. It really doesn't pertain to me. He goes, it doesn't pertain to who I really am. It's just a conditioning of the body. And, he was right. Now, You could just leave it and do nothing about it, but my personality is I'm inquisitive about it. I'm like, why is this coming up? This is strange. Why would this come up? And so I delve into it, and I find things go away after you delve into it and understand it, which is where I kind of part ways, I guess, with some forms of non-duality, because some people believe, well, after non-duality, there's you awaken. There's nothing you need to do, which is true. As Nisargadatta said, he didn't need to deal with his anger, but some people want to just for fun. but I would say, the form anger and frustration takes is greatly changed. So, a lot of suffering like worry and stress and regret have fallen away, and I haven't experienced it. Haven't experienced sorrow in 18 years. Kind of have doubts that I'll experience it again, just because the way my understanding is. But when it comes to, say, frustration or anger, it still may arise because there's conditioning, and that's the nature of this body to have a bit of a fiery temper. When it does arise, it's kind of like a lightning strike. It's here one moment, gone the next. It passes quickly, doesn't leave residual. I don't smolder in anger or frustration. It's not bothering me hours, days, weeks at a time. I'm not. It doesn't influence my relationships. If somebody does something and it ticks me off, I might give them a look or shout back if they said something to me. But if I see him again, it's kind of a clean slate. That interaction doesn't bother me. So the nature of the emotions change, and so while suffering and may arise in subtle forms of getting ticked off or frustration, I'm okay with that. I wouldn't even say sadness would be a problem, because for me, sorrow, sadness hasn't risen, but I'm not saying it could never happen, because Ramana Maharshi, who is a well-known non-duality guru, there's a story of when his mother died. He wept. He shed tears that day. Now, if somebody wanted to be really black and white and have these rules of thou shalt not suffer if you're enlightened, could go, oh, even Ramana's not enlightened because he wept when his mother died. I'm going, no, that's not necessarily true, because you have other Indian gurus like Paramahansa Yogananda at one point said, death, in particular your own, is sometimes one of the deepest unknown attachments. Until you're on the brink, you just don't know about it, And so similarly, there was an deep, unheld, unseen conditioning in Ramana Maharshi that when his mother died, caused a reaction where he wept. But it's not like he wept for days, weeks, months later, mourning, going, I can't go on without mother. That wasn't the case. It was more of a natural arising of, this is what happened. Now, I say sadness and sorrow doesn't arise for me, in terms of my personal life. If I watch a tearjerker movie, I'll cry. Those are masterful works of art designed to make you cry, with the right music, staging, lights, colors, everything. They are like scientifically designed to wrench your heart. And if you cry in those, I see no problem with that. That's not a form of suffering. If anything, that's just a natural arising of being human.
Yeah. No. Well, this has been an incredible conversation today, my dear friend.
Yes, it's been a great conversation, and loved it, really. It was just a lot of fun.
Yes, yeah. I welcome further conversation in the near future. What I will say, I'm going to put all your social media under this podcast, and then, of course, it'll go out in a couple of weeks on YouTube and a couple of weeks later on all 20 platforms. So basically, where people can find you is the YouTube channel is the main source of interaction.
That's the main source. The non-duality enlightenment simplified is my YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. If you want to see the historical content, non-dualitysimplified.com has got my old blogs and podcasts, and I've been creating content for many years, and it's all stationed there.
Cool. So with that, in closing, I want to ask you one last question. What's your definition of consciousness?
Consciousness is fundamentally the ultimate reality. It's Brahman itself. It's consciousness is how that is experienced in a I guess physical form, in a being, in terms of well, it's two parts. Consciousness is all there is, but awareness, which is very similar, because as a human, we experience consciousness via our awareness. We're aware we exist. We're conscious. And so there's that. But a stone that doesn't have senses of perception may not be aware in the same way, but there's still consciousness. Consciousness is the fabric of reality. It's ultimate reality. It's all there is. Everything's consciousness. That is the one. When we're saying non-duality, oneness, Brahman, self, whatever term, we're just, you could also say consciousness. It's just different pointers to that which is the ultimate reality and ground of all being.
Beautiful, beautiful, my friend. I've done hundreds of podcasts, never heard the same answer, which I think is absolutely beautiful and poetic and synchronized to the signature of your expression as consciousness. And it's unique, yet it's all things and nothing at the same time. Well, I want to thank you, my dear friend, for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And it's been a real pleasure. I look forward to welcoming another conversation in the future. And on that closing, I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.